Hello there, Sharks. I'm Jonathan Little for PokerNews.com, and before we get to this video today, I have a big sale for you at my site, PokerCoaching.com. Because it is Cyber Week. It's one of my favorite weeks of the year. You can get big discounts on all sorts of stuff. Now is the time to take advantage of all of the knowledge that I have available for you at PokerCoaching.com at a big discounted price. So check it out at PokerCoaching.com/CyberWeek. We'll put a link in the description of the video on YouTube. Let's take a look at this hand today from the $10,000 buy-in GG Millions that takes place every week on GG Poker. We have an interesting hand where we're playing 40,000 to 80,000 blinds, and there are 3 relatively short stacks at this table and 2 pretty deep stacks. We have Little Monk with 6 million chips. It's a whole lot of chips, about 75 big blinds. And B. Botian in the big blind with about 50 big blinds. Folds down to Little Monk in the hijack seat. Obviously, he's going to raise the ace-queen. This is a scenario where Little Monk should be raising pretty wide. When you are the biggest stack at a final table, especially a final table with a relatively flat payout structure, you're going to want to raise much wider than a GTO chart would say if there were no payout implications. A lot of people make the error of just pulling up GTO charts and blindly following them when there are payout implications, but that is a big mistake. In this scenario, the big stack should be looser than GTO, and the middle stacks should be tighter than GTO because they really don't want to go broke before Pandora Box here on the button, who has only about 15 big blinds. So Ace-Queen raises it up, folds around to B. Botian in the big blind with Ace-4 offsuit, and he should call this hand. I mean, Ace-4 is not a great hand in this scenario, but if you make top pair, you're usually pretty happy. That said, after the flop, he has to be much more cautious compared to if there were no payout implications, because, again, going broke would be a disaster. So, flop comes 9-3-2, 2 diamonds, B. Botian checks. I have to presume Little Monk is going to bet this flop pretty frequently and probably every time. You're going to find that when you are the chip leader against the second biggest stack at the final table, you get to use a lot of small bets. While on a 9-3-2 board, perhaps you can check back some hands with no payout implications. With payout implications, you want to be betting basically every time using a small size. You get to do lots and lots of small betting as the big stack because there's not a whole lot that the clear middle stack or clear second stack can do about it. Because they don't want to raise and get jammed on, they don't want to raise and get called. Calling is also pretty rough with this Ace-4, for example, out of position because if you face a turn and river bet, it's not great. So it puts B. Botian in a pretty nasty scenario. So, what would you do with this Ace-4 in this scenario? This is a spot that comes up pretty often. You better have a plan. I want you to take a second and think about what you do in this spot. Would you just fold to the 98,000 bet into the 426,000 pot with the gut shot and overcard? Would you call? Would you raise to something like 300K? Or would you raise big to something like 600K? Take a second, pause the video, and write what you would do in the comment section below. This is a tough spot, and really, this is the kind of spot I put my students in on a very regular basis at PokerCoaching.com in the quiz section. We have over 1,400 interactive quizzes where I put you in B. Botian's shoes here, usually in a spot that I played, or one of my other coaches will put you in a spot that they played, and ask, what are you thinking about in the spot, and how would you respond? If you want full access to all those quizzes, make sure you check it out at PokerCoaching.com/CyberWeek. You can get in there at a big discount. This is a spot where I think there are really only 2 options. We can either call or we can check raise small. I think in general, check raising small is pretty sweet, especially with no payout implications. This is a hand that you can easily check raise and then fold if you get re-raised, right? So it's essentially a junky draw, which is good. You want to have some junky draws in your check raising range. But I'm not actually sure if you want to be check raising because there are payout implications. Because if you do check raise here, you have to expect the big stack to float, call in position, with any sort of flush draw or backdoor flush draw that has overcards. Any sort of straight draw, obviously all the pairs are going to call. So I don't think you actually have a ton of fold equity here. I do know B. Botian gets in there and battles pretty hard, so if I had to guess, he's probably going to err on the aggressive side, but I think the default play for me in this spot would be to call, but if you wanted to raise it up, I think that's also at least viable. You do have to be very careful as the clear second stack in this scenario, though, because you should have way less fold equity in this spot than you normally would. B. Botian's giving it some thought. And he does put in the raise at 300K. You may say, why not go big? Why not go to 500 or 600,000? You know, I don't hate it. The problem, though, is that if you get actioned in, you're usually in pretty terrible shape. When you go small, you will get called by a wider range that you can then play okay against on the turn or river. Whenever you check raise big and get called, you're usually in pretty bad shape with this ace-4. So also, when you go bigger, you're going to get jammed on more often because you're just putting more money in the pot. The pot is now bigger, and your opponent has a bigger incentive to try to steal it immediately with all of their drawy type hands that have decent equity, and their best made hands want protection, so you're going to get jammed on more often, which you don't really want with a hand like ace-4 because you usually have some pretty clean outs. In this spot, only 4 clean outs, but usually have a pretty good number of outs in this scenario. Little Monk gives us some thoughts, and you may say, easily fold, duh. But no. In this scenario, notice he has to put in 200,000 to try to win 1,000,000 chips. 200K to win 1,000,000 is a great price. This is a spot where you absolutely cannot fold. A lot of people with the big stack make the mistake of just folding immediately, not considering their opponent's tendencies and the fact that it's kind of hard to connect on 9-3-2, and the hands that have connected on 9-3-2 are usually going to be one pair type hands. Notice in the spot, even if Little Monk is drawing to 6 outs, that's still 20-something% equity in position, right? And as the big stack with big payout implications because of the 3 relatively short stacks, this is a spot where Little Monk should be calling quite wide with any hand that has any sort of decent equity, and ace-queen certainly does. So you got to call in this spot. Turns it 2. Pretty nasty spot for Bebotian now, because now if he bets the turn, no flush draw is going to fold, no pair is going to fold, and ace-high may even call. So Bebotian in this spot really cannot get a bluff through, at least on the turn. Now he may be able to bet the turn and then jam the river and get a lot of hands worse than a 9 to fold, which could be pretty sweet. The problem, though, is that when you run into a 9 or trips or an overpair, you have just made a severe ICM blunder because you'll end up going broke 5th with 3 other very short stacks at the table. So Bebotian does check, and I think the play here is to probably check call against a small bet, check fold against a big bet. It's kind of tough because obviously Little Monk could just bet big with a lot of his bluffs and small with a lot of his value hands, but I think that's probably going to be the play in this scenario. Bebotian does opt to check, and now Little Monk has to decide if he should check or bet. If you are going to bet in this spot, I think you need to bet small. If you are betting in the spot, you are value betting. Remember how I said earlier that the big stack at the final table often just gets to make a lot of really frequent and small bets, because whenever you bet small, it's really hard for your opponent to defend anywhere near the minimum defense frequency. Like imagine in this scenario you bet 200,000 chips. Your opponent needs to defend a ton, a lot. Now, they're certainly going to want to underdefend because they're out of position and they're going to realize their equity poorly on the river because Little Monk gets to bluff a lot due to the payout implications. But, I mean, I have to imagine he's supposed to defend with something like, 70-75% of his range, and it's kind of hard to do. It's hard to defend 70 or 75% of your range. Maybe that number is actually 60%. I don't know. If someone has a GTO solver with payout implications in this scenario, run it. Let me know how often Bebotian is supposed to defend against a 200K bet in this scenario. But it's going to be a lot, right? And if he is check raising stuff like ace-4 and gut shots, it's pretty hard to do. Little Monk gives us some thought. He does go small, 157,000. You may say, doesn't this open him up to get check raised? It does. The thing, though, is that Little Monk can just easily have a 2 here. You may say, he's not raising any 2s from the cutoff. Yes, he is. Remember, he's the big stack. And as the big stack at the final table, you should be raising ace-2, king-2 suited, queen-2 suited, 5-2 suited, 4-2 suited. You should be really, really aggressive in this spot. So this is a scenario where Little Monk definitely has a lot of 2s, and he also has a lot of 9s and a lot of overpairs. So Bebotian cannot get away with check raising the turn all that often. Would be a pretty sweet play, though. Facing the small bet, obviously ace-4 is a call. Any ace-high here in this spot is going to be a call. And you got to realize you're probably just going to lose this hand on the river. River's the 6 of diamonds. Pretty rough spot for Bebotian. He has a pretty bad hand on the river. I would have just checked and lose, and check and lose this hand, because if you check and a Little Monk checks back, he basically always has a better made hand. If you check and Little Monk bets, you probably can't be calling bluff on the 6 of diamond river. But let's see if Bebotian has other plans. He's giving it some thought. Is he going to get frisky? Is he going to put in a lead? I will say, before we figure out what he does, this is a pretty rough spot to lead because Little Monk has a lot of flush draws in his range. He's going to open up a lot of suited hands, way more than normal, again, because he gets to open up wider than normal preflop. He's definitely going to bet him on the flop. He's definitely going to call a check raise with him, and he's definitely going to have them here on the river. So this is a spot where Botian has to be very, very careful because he's going to be running into a lot of flushes. Also, obviously, if Little Monk has trips, he's going to call. If he has a 9, he may even find a call. So leading's pretty dicey, but I know Botian likes to battle. Pot's 1.3 million. What's he going to do? Making us wait. 900K! Spicy bet! I'm honestly kind of surprised he made this bet here. I don't think I ever would have made this bet, but if you think about it, this is, of course, the only way he's going to win this hand. Because like I said, if he faces a bet on the river, he probably just has to fold. And if it checks through, he probably is against a better marginal made hand like ace-queen or a random 6-5 that made a pair. He does go for this lead. It's always interesting when someone leads in a spot where, at least in my mind, they should not do much leading. And you're going to find that in general, the 3-flush boards by the river heavily favor the initial raiser, because the initial raiser has all the suited aces, lots of suited kings, in this scenario, suited queens, jacks, 10s, 8s, etc., right? So you have to be very, very careful leading in this scenario. But I suppose as this hand is played out, Little Monk's range does look pretty marginal, right? Because he did bet the flop small, call the raise, and then he bet small on the turn. I think that small turn bet's kind of telling to where it either makes him have something like a 9 or a hand like pocket 8s. Maybe a 2 would go for that play. Maybe a flush draw would go for that play. Or a lot of good ace highs, ace king, ace queen, ace jack. And if that's his range, perhaps he just has enough ace queen, ace king, and ace jack that you can make fold out to the point that you can get away with this pretty optimistic bet. So do we call with the ace queen here? I don't know. Look, I don't know if I've played much at all with Botian, but I've reviewed enough of his hands to where I know that he likes to make aggressive plays. Against players who you generally know like to make aggressive plays, I'm not going to say you should call this ace-queen, but you should find a lot of hero calls when a lot of draws miss. And in this scenario, do a lot of draws miss? Well, 6-5 probably would not lead, but 5-4 may. But should it? Should 5-4 lead in this spot? I'm not even sure, because you got to think 5-4 is a really nice hand just to check and call. So if 5-4 is not leading, this probably should just be a lot of flushes or nothing. The thing is find the nothing. Find the nothing. Remember, he checked, raised the flop, and then called a turn bet. It's not a lot of nothing in his range, right? The only nothing that makes any sense whatsoever is ace-5, ace-4. Notice 6-5 and 6-4 got there. Notice the flush draws got there. Not a whole lot of nothing, right? Weird spot. It's hard to find the nothing. When it's hard to find the nothing, I guess you got to fold. If Little Monk had an ace of diamonds or a queen of diamonds in this spot, I think it's pretty close to a call. But I think with this ace-queen, no diamond, man, that's annoying. I guess you got to fold, especially given you block the only possible bluffs that make any sense to me of ace-5 and ace-4. Little Monk says, not sure if, doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but then folds. And Botian steals, blatantly steals, a very nice pot. Fun scenario, right? That's me for today. If you enjoyed this video, do me a favor and click the like and subscribe button. Also, be sure to check out Poker News. They are one of the absolute best sources of news in the poker space. They are where I go to get my news, so check it out at pokernews.com. Good luck in your games. Have a great week. Thank you for being here. If you were not here, well, I guess I wouldn't be here either. I appreciate you. I'll talk to you next time. Howdy, partners. Station Master Little here with a public service announcement.
It's come to my attention that a few of you have become extreme calling stations. Now, I love calling. I'm the station master after all. But you can't call with queen high every time. Sometimes you have to fold.
Click subscribe to make sure you don't become a superstation.